Hi, this is Jonathan Rosenhead, Jerusalem psychotherapist. This week's Torah and Psychology post, the Parshas Balak, is going to discuss psychopathology. And I'm going to use psychopathology as a way of conceptualizing nevuah, and to understand the difference between the nevuah of Bilam and the nevuah of Am Yisrael. Because in this week's pasuk, in this week's parsha, we read, Vayaka Elokim El Bilam. That Hashem, when he spoke to Bilam, it was by chance, derech mikre. And Rashi in Parashat Vayikra makes a comparison between the prophecy of Bilam and the prophecy of Moshe, that Hashem would speak to Moshe directly. It was a personal conversation with each other. Whereas when he spoke to Bilam, it was just by chance, a chance occurrence, and he would give him a message. So we see that the quality of Bilam's prophecy was on a lower level. And the Rambam discusses nevuah and the dynamics of nevuah. And he says that when a prophet in the Jewish people would receive nevuah, they would go through it was a process. There were certain preliminary conditions that would have to be in place in order for a person to receive nevuah. They would have to go through a process, and they would be on a level of purity and holiness and cleanliness and clarity of mind. They would have to go through this whole preparatory stage just to be able to make themselves into a person that was able to receive nevuah. And then when they would be receiving nevuah, the Rambam describes this transformative process. They would go through a transformation of almost becoming a different person. Their body would become weak, they would tremble, their mind, they would lose control to an extent over their senses, and their mind would just become completely clear in order to receive this vision. It would be the nevuah that they would receive from Hashem would be a metaphorical image. And when they were in this state of clarity and holiness, that they've gone through this preparatory stage, they would be able to understand the message that Hashem was giving them, and to be able to then give the nevuah over to the Bnei Yisrael. So when we see this whole process that the Rambam describes about nevuah, of prophecy, in some way it sounds like psychopathology. When a person is in a state, psychopathology is, the word itself is derived from two Greek words of psych, meaning soul, and pathos, meaning suffering. And colloquially, we understand psychopathology in psychiatry and psychology to be the diagnosis of mental disorders and understanding their development and the origin of mental disorders and their treatment. And when we think of psychopathology, a person might be in a state of psychosis, they might be in a state of disassociation, where they feel a certain detachment from reality. They feel detached from their own body. There's a sense of loss of control and general confusion. And the description that the Rambam is giving of nevuah, of this process that a Navi goes through, in some way you could see that it's equatable to psychopathology, but this is the point that we have to make, that psychopathology is a loss of control. People that it's not an intentional, it's not that they're acting, thinking or behaving in an intentional way, but rather it's rooted in the mental disorder that they are suffering from. Whereas the description of the Rambam, of the process that a Navi goes through, is a deliberate process that a Navi goes through of preparing themselves, of building themselves up, of putting themselves into a state of holiness to prepare themselves and turn them into a person that is able to receive the nevuah and able to understand with clarity the message that Hashem is giving them. So we can see, and I'm using this conceptualization of psychopathology to understand the difference between the vision, the images, and the metaphorical messages that a Navi was receiving, and their ability to understand this, and the process that they would go through, this transformative process that they would go through to become almost a different body, a different person detached from their body when they were receiving nevuah, is not psychopathology. And Bilam, we could say that he received nevuah he didn't have a control. It wasn't something. He didn't go through a process of building himself up, of developing himself in order to receive nevuah. It was derech mikre. It was by chance. So his nevuah was more in line with this idea of the psychopathology, the psyche of the soul. He had the nevuah, but the pathos, with the suffering, he didn't have this control that a Navi of Am Yisrael had when receiving nevuah. So have a great Shabbos and keep well.